The future of the global economy is rapidly changing, with emerging markets like the BRICS nations poised to play a leading role in shaping the economic landscape for decades to come. From the explosive growth of China's tech industry to the rise of India as a major player in the global IT sector, the developments across the BRICS group are nothing short of shocking. But the future of the global economy extends beyond just the BRICS nations, with other emerging markets like Nigeria and Indonesia also poised to become key players in the years ahead. As the world continues to evolve and new economic powers emerge, it's clear that the future of the global economy is anything but predictable. Today, we'll look at the shocking future of the global economy. Global economic power has undergone an extraordinary reconfiguration over the last 20 years. This has been principally fueled by the rise of China and, to a lesser extent, the BRICS nations in general, including Brazil, Russia, India, and South Africa, in addition to the East Asian giant. Many observers have been concerned that this group's growing influence may be accompanied by the normalization of authoritarian forms of state capitalism and even the dissolution of the liberal order, as it has become more formalized and institutionalized, hosting regular summits and creating collective bodies. Others hold a more upbeat perspective, contending that Eastern models of state-led development are superior to Anglo-American political and economic systems in many aspects, and that this is compatible with and, in fact, depends on an open global market. Regardless, many Western liberals' worries have returned in the wake of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Western governments are concerned about recent reports that Egypt, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and other primarily non-democratic regimes have sought to join the BRICS or are considering it. What is the BRICS and why is it important? The concept of BRICS is related to some degree. The term BRIC was first used in the early 2000s by Jim O'Neill, a former economist at Goldman Sachs, to refer to the four rapidly developing nations that appeared most likely to begin catching up to the West at the turn of the millennium. This idea seems to be rather problematic in retrospect. Brazil faced early deindustrialization, and growth there drastically decreased around 2014. Previously, Russia was a superpower. Therefore, it was and still is debatable to refer to it as rising, especially given that its industrially atrophied post-communist economy has remained modest on a global scale. Despite having a population almost 3 times the size of the UK and the largest, most resource-rich region on the globe, the country's GDP is still just around half that of the UK, even as it launches a significant military offensive. Although India has had significant growth, its proportional contribution to global GDP has decreased, and its economy is now just about 1/5 the size of China's. One writer compares the two to the slouching tiger and roaring dragon. South Africa was principally added to the grouping subsequently for purposes of regional representativeness, even though it is debatably not a growing power at all on the world scale. China's startling rise plays a significant role in the BRICS story. Its growth has been so consistent over a very long time that it has changed how economic power is distributed around the world. Why are nations looking for new ways to collaborate? The reasons why potential BRICS countries want to join are complicated. Consider Saudi Arabia, which is already a very wealthy nation, has close security ties with the United States and can mobilize significant sovereign resources for investment in the pursuit of economic growth. However, internal political modernization is still behind. The economy is heavily dependent on energy, and long-term global decarbonization poses a threat to the economy. The murder of the journalist Jamal Khashoggi has also resulted in some diplomatic isolation. Like all authoritarian nations, Saudi Arabia must look for sources of local and global legitimacy. Growingly close trade ties with China will be essential to this effort, since they will diversify the economy and the sources of outside assistance. Similar tales can be seen in Egypt, Iran, and Turkey, where the various regimes have all recently dealt with unstable economies, political unrest, and diplomatic isolation. The Middle East as a whole is still very much affected by the Arab Spring from 10 years ago, which makes the region's leaders uneasy and prolongs repression. Argentina is a different potential member of the BRICS. Since the devastating financial crisis of 2001, growth has been erratic. During the late 2000s and the beginning of the 2010s, there were times of expansion and policy experimentation. But the currency has collapsed, and inflation has continued to be high. Before 2001, $1 bought 1 peso. A decade later, it bought 8 to 10. Yet another decade later, it now buys 148. Debt is once more increasing. After the 2001 financial crisis, it shot up from about 40% of GDP to 160%, dropped back to around 40% along with the commodity boom by 2014, and then shot back up to over 100% of GDP by the time the pandemic hit in 2020. Argentina has long needed fresh financial resources and institutional authority on the international stage. In fact, during the global financial crisis of 2007 to 2009, its quest for participation in the Group of 20 partly mirrored dissatisfaction over Brazil's membership and comparatively greater perceived standing as an emerging power. But what does it mean for the BRICS as a whole? The addition of new members should theoretically result in increased strength through numbers and access to additional economic resources. The group's growth also gives it more legitimacy and strengthens people's opinions that the club is worthwhile, which might have a snowball effect. While these possible new members are undoubtedly important for the region, they are not the biggest, most powerful, most active economically, or most influential diplomatically among the nations that could hypothetically join. With Argentina, Iran, and Saudi Arabia entering, the BRICS would no longer primarily consist of emerging powers in a global sense. The bigger problem is, therefore, that the BRICS as a whole still lacks deeper institutionalization. It is difficult to tell what the organization has accomplished outside of holding annual meetings after the NDB was founded. This issue is made worse by the fact that economic growth trajectories have been so disparate, and the group lacks a clear set of ideological tenets that bind it together or a common understanding of how to manage the world order. Therefore, increasing membership is at least in part about regaining momentum in a situation when the BRICS are still plagued by conflicting interests, development trajectories, relative levels of geo-economic significance, and the capacity to exert significant influence over the global system. What potential effects might the BRICS' growth have on the world economy? From a Western perspective, there is concern over the BRICS countries' increasing authoritarianism and nationalism over the previous 10 years, except South Africa. In China, Xi Jinping has solidified his power. Both Brazil under Jair Bolsonaro, who will soon face Lula da Silva in the second round of the presidential election, and India under Narendra Modi have seen their governments take a blatantly populist turn. The pariah state of Vladimir Putin's Russia raises a number of challenging geopolitical issues that go far beyond the current Ukraine situation. Minorities are persecuted, and civil liberties are curtailed in all 4. In light of this, some policymakers in Europe and the US are concerned that the BRICS may transition from being an economic club of emerging countries, striving to influence global growth and development, to one more defined by its authoritarian nationalism. The West and the BRICS, however, have a lot in common. People around the world have long been frustrated with market-driven globalization in terms of economics. In awe of China's growth, the United States, numerous European nations, and even the European Union have reevaluated their critical need for new structures and procedures to support interventionist industrial strategy. Politically, Western nations have seen reductions in the caliber of democracy, with Brexit and Donald Trump's election simply being the most prominent examples of ongoing constitutional instability. European nations seem more susceptible to further democratic degradation now than at any other moment in recent memory, as nationalists like Giorgia Meloni in Italy and Marine Le Pen in France win elections. The conflict in Ukraine appears to have established a clear diplomatic line between Russia, backed by the East, and the West. This, however, only serves to conceal the fact that many of the latter's banking institutions and political elites actively supported Putin's government, even as its excesses were more and more obvious. As a result, as the BRICS grow, they pose a threat to the global order and encourage the West to adopt illiberal values. However, the East also has to deal with the opposing pressure to liberalize itself, which would both reinforce and alter that system. What do you think of the video? Feel free to let us know in the comments section below. Also, before you go, make sure you leave a like and subscribe to our channel for more amazing updates on some of the latest news around the world. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.